Hello, Janksters, and welcome to another edition of the MagicJank podcast, the weekly show where members of Team MagicJank get together and we talk about whatever's going on in the world of Magic. And this particular month, or this week, is going to be interesting because we don't have a lot of new spoilers or anything to dive into, so we're going to touch on Standard because it's going to be rotating soon. So we want to have kind of a deep dive and kind of talk about what you need to know going into rotation. And I'm really excited to hear kind of our thoughts on what decks are going to stick around versus which ones are going to be leaving for good. Because I know the three of us have thoughts. And you're wondering, wait, who else is here today? Well, we've got a couple of other lovely gentlemen. We've got Damien, F16. Damien, how's it going, man?
I'm good. It's not super hot here yet. We're getting by, but yeah, it's Sunday. I have nothing to do today. I'm going to go play some games later, non-Magic board games, which is going to be fun. So just chilling, relaxing, waiting for that rotation, just kind of floating, on the ocean, waiting for the tides to change. But how about you guys? How's life?
Yeah. Oh, I'm doing well, man. Thanks for asking. And our other host today, we got Carlo, C. Rhoda Jr. How's it going, man?
Yeah, what up, everybody? Doing pretty good. Also in the Bloomborough waiting room for the next, 2.5 weeks or something like this, because it's coming out soon. Just a few weeks away from what would be the streamer event and then pre-release and stuff like this. So yeah, waiting for new standard rotation.
Heck yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm right there with you. I know. So actually, I'm curious. What have you guys been doing to kind of pass the time as we get ready for the rotation? I know I've been playing a ton of Timeless. Like a ton of Timeless. Like I have a problem. I've been playing so much Timeless. How about you guys? Anything fun happening?
MH3 you heard me talk about before. I really love the limited format, so I was doing a lot of that. I haven't done any since the Arena Open, but that's something I know a lot of players are still enjoying. That format has turned into a favorite of many players, which is good to see. Those kind of sets, like you're paying, especially in real life, you're paying more money to draft them and stuff like that. And it's good when they turn out, well balanced, whatever. So that's good, playing limited, but playing other games. There's just so many other games to play. Honestly, when I am playing Magic, I'm messing around in Standard with non-tier decks. Other than that, I'm just playing other stuff. But how about you, Favretta?
Love it. Yeah.
Well, I do a lot of the viewer deck stuff, and so recently, a lot of folks have been submitting decks for me to play that are rotation proof. So that way we can start on that path of taking those decks that are rotation proof and then maybe adding new cards to them or something like this. But obviously, maybe you are a little bit weaker to the powerful cards that will be rotating. But we still have been doing pretty well with them. So it's been a blast.
Yeah, that's a great segue into, I think, our first topic, which is, of course, this upcoming rotation. I think a lot of players, especially, I don't think it matters if you're a digital Magic player or an IRL player. You want to know what is going to hold value. You want to know where should I invest my wild cards or real money. If you're, some of the cards, Gix is $30, Ancient Cornicopia still over $30. That card may not see any play if Domain doesn't survive rotation. That kind of stuff. Where do you put your money? Where do you put your wild cards? So, I say, I was mentioning this before the cast as well, but I just wrote an article about exactly this topic on MTG Circle, and I kind of broke it down into 3 baskets: the winners, the losers, and the uncertains. So, of course, the winners are the decks that I think are going to emerge unscathed from the rotation. So, I don't know. Would you guys mind starting there? We'll start with maybe the decks that hopefully hold their value a little bit at least.
I think that's perfect. Absolutely. So which decks do you think are going to stay relevant and continue to be, in the new meta going forward? Yeah.
Well, if you want, I think when I look at the tier 1 decks in Standard right now, it's easy to kind of parse them into these baskets. I think one of the most obvious ones, one of the most played decks in Standard is Boros Aggro. It's been the top kind of aggro deck, and there's other flavors of aggro. Monor Red still making up a small percentage in that game. Gruul's getting more popular. But Boros in particular has such an explosive start. They're losing basically nothing. They're losing Voldaire and Epicure, which is a big loss for the deck because they need a 1-drop that makes 2 pieces of cardboard. And Voldaire and Epicure is one of the only 2 1-drops that does that alongside Novice Inspectors. So losing one of those and not being able to have that super explosive, Voldaire and Epicure into turn 2 red sorcery that makes 3 goblins, explosion, whatever it's called. Demolition,
Demolition, yeah.
Yep.
Gleeful, and that sets up the kill on turn 3, right? So just like not having that, it makes the deck a little bit slower, but it's a small difference. I think that's gonna be offset by the fact that the next set coming out, Bloomburrow, is a bunch of anthropomorphic animals. You're bound to have a bunch of little dudes to fill that slot.
Sure.
Not to mention you've got Yoshin Soldier or Yoshin Frontliner, which already those decks kind of play. You could up the count on those. It's not ideal, but it still gets sacked and then still comes back, with Unearth or whatever. Yep. So still gets sacked to the Demolition. I mean. Anyway, so I think Boros is a winner here. You've even got the Fairy Nurturing Pixie in the one spot, but that's not exactly making yourself get to that explosive start that you had with the Epicure. But still, there are replacements, is what I'm saying. So I think this is a big winner. This deck barely loses anything. It's going to lose a couple channel lands, which aren't a big deal for this deck. And where do you guys think Boros Aggro is going to fall in this new metagame? I think it's pretty safe to say it's going to be tier 1, right?
Yeah, well, it was one of WotC's considerations on taking action on possible standard bans. In the last ban announcement, they said the one card they were considering banning was Knight Errant of Eos. So obviously they have knowledge in advance on what Bloomburrow is going to bring, and so that means that they considered that the Boros Convoke deck might be too strong for newly rotated standard if they wanted to ban this card. So, just the fact that this card allows you to refill your hand on turn 3 for additional threats is very strong. The card itself, a 4/4 for, essentially 1 mana, sometimes free. 4/4s are easily killable. We have cards like Obliterating Bolt, obviously Go for the Throat, different single target removal spells. Wrath effects are very strong against Convoke unless they have the very fast start. But we also lose early mass removal against that deck. We don't have Path of Peril anymore. So you were limited to like Brotherhood End and Temporary Lockdown for turn 3, that mass removal. And they still thought that Knight Errant of Eos was too good.
Knight's
so
powerful.
I'm interested to see what is in Bloomburrow that they think that this deck is still too strong. It's got to be another 1-drop that might not deal a damage like Epicure did, but has to put something else into play.
Sure.
Right.
Or another like really strong 1-drop that they think just belongs in this deck in general. So
I agree.
It definitely still exists and definitely very powerful.
And you might be right. Maybe it is something that sees a ban. I mean, they do have that 2-week window after new set drops. Maybe if just Boros is absolutely dominant. I mean, it's kind of crazy. It's weird to ban a card like that, but it is that powerful. You're right. And they did mention that it might be a problem. I think the other thing that people forget as well. Oh, sorry, Ham. Do you have an opinion on Boros?
I'm just glad you brought that up because I that was the one point that I can think of because I think the rotation itself is not going to hurt the deck. Notably, Damien, I think you're spot on. It doesn't make a huge difference. But Knight Errant of Eos being on the short list, if this gets banned, then all of a sudden that's the biggest threat to that deck. But rotation itself. Doesn't practically doesn't touch it.
And I think another thing that you always have to consider with these cycles, and this happens every rotation, the big winner almost by default with every rotation are the proactive aggro decks. And I talk about this in my article where I basically say in an unknown format, it behooves you to be the one asking the questions. Like if you were playing a proactive, fast, efficient, effective deck like an aggro deck, then you're in a much better position against a wide open unknown field than trying to play control or trying to play like some mid-range deck that you have to have a bunch of answers for all these different things. It's much better to be the one asking the questions than the one answering them in an unknown format.
Sure.
So rotation, the first week or two, you're always going to see aggro be overrepresented, I think. And so just another reason why I think Boros is going to be almost certainly the deck to beat. And it's the deck you should test against and consider when debating whether or not to buy new cards or craft those turn those wild cards into a deck or whatever, right? So what are the other big winners? What do you guys think here? Do you guys have another one?
Well, dovetailing off of that, I want to call out Monor Red. I mean, Monor Red is as the years have gone on, we've had a Monor Red deck in standard, well, forever. That just is what it is. But as new sets have come out, that deck has gotten some new toys, and older ones have fallen out of favor well before they rotated. Like Valdaren Epicure is an example that we did used to see in those Monor Red decks, and we just don't anymore because nobody needs to run it. The only one that I think is going to be meaningful, the only one that's really the Monor Red deck is going to miss, I think, is going to be Kumano Faces Kakazan.
That's the big one.
That rotating is going to be significant, but at the same time. Well, that and Play with Fire, but we still have Shock. So, like, if you want it, you can still do it. That's not really a big deal. But yeah, Kumano Face and Kakazan, there's no other card that does as much as this does in that deck. And so it'll be interesting to see if they can adapt. But at the same time, with the Slick Shot Prowess thing, Monstrous Rage isn't going anywhere. Lightning Strike's not going anywhere. I mean...
Yeah,
I feel like the Monor Red deck is gonna Urbrass Forge isn't going anywhere either. Like the number of builds of that deck that are completely unaffected with this one card being the only exception is pretty massive. So
I think Mono Red would be more popular if we had monocolor creature lands still in the format. The fact that our creature lands are dual colored almost makes it better to be Gruul, Boros, like having the mana fixing. Or it's not just the creature lands, but it's like those kind of things. What is the reason to be red? Just red. When you can be red-white or red-green and be much better. Like, when we get to the Esper Raffine deck, it's a similar kind of situation where it's like, why are we playing Esper? Isn't blue-black just better? The only reason to play white is Raffine or Wedding Announcement. Or and once these rotate, I mean, we'll get to that deck, but it's the same idea here, I think. Why are we mono red when, like, you're much more explosive, powerful, resilient, whatever, by being Boros, by being Gruul? I mean, I think Gruul with the protection, like, it is mono red, but you're just touching green for, like, your Tameo safekeeping effects, whatever. You know what I mean? The give a creature hexproof, royal treatment, there's a bunch of them in standard. That just gives you this crazy combo kind of edge. I don't know. It's the same reason green-white toxic decks splash blue for March. March is like the oops, I win combo card. So I don't know. It's interesting. Mono Red is going to be a deck. People are still going to play it, I think. But I think, I don't know why it's better. I think the other aggro decks are better. But what do you think, Carlo?
Well, speaking of the toxic deck for a moment, and I know Ham just flashed the March of Swirling Mists on the screen. This card rotates.
Glad to see that one gone.
We don't have to see the random venerated Rot Priest kill you turn 4 with marching everything in existence away. But I also think, like, speaking on maybe sleeper decks or sleeper cards, the toxic deck still stays around. You can still Skrelv, Rot Priest, Jawbone Duelist, Anic Sentry, for example, Skrelv's Hive. That base in Phyrexia all will be one. Still most certainly stays around, and that deck is powerful in current standard. And outside of the March, I think the channel lands are the only things that it might occasionally play. Everything else is largely untouched. And you still have so many like savable cards, like the Saviors, like Tameo Safekeeping, like Tyvar Stand, like Loran's Escape, if they want to play that, because the Boros Heroic deck that's currently in standard, it's like tier 2.5 or whatever, plays that card, right? So, like, we have all of these resilient cards in this deck, and it's much easier to get somebody to 10 than it is 20.
Oh, yeah. It's so funny.
Yeah.
That's just, it's a one set deck. It's so funny. As long as that set's legal and standard, that deck will exist. As soon as that set rotates, that deck will not exist. It's like this bizarre one set deck.
How often do you see a draft archetype become a standard deck and be viable in the meta? Like, that doesn't happen. I mean, every now and then, but not often.
Yeah,
and that one absolutely
often.
Did.
When the mechanic is busted, aka here's energy. Here's when the mechanic is busted, it's busted.
The only thing that deck is really part of what made it resilient is the March, because you could phase your creatures out of play. When your opponent board wipes, it's very, very weak to board wipes. You can't save your entire board. There's nothing that just gives your things all indestructible until a turn, except Invasion of Gobakon. Now, I don't know that the deck will move to play that, but it would be a good piece for it to help be resilient to, like, not depopulate rotates. No Witnesses, that is a legal 4-drop Wrath spell, or Deadly Cover Up or something like this. But still resilient to Sunfall. So
Yeah, and temporary lockdown is really the one that wrecks that deck. It eats your Skrelb's Hives, it eats everything. I think you're almost better playing Pick Your Poison or some kind of destroy enchantment card. But the what you're saying, so it's really funny. That kind of deck, despite not rotating, the deck's entire core is still intact. Mm-hmm. Losing just the one card, it doesn't sound like it's much. It's just one card, but that card gave it that facet that it doesn't have anymore. Of just like, I'm a combo deck. I can just win out of nowhere. Like it was like mono blue aggro back in the day with the 4 Djinns and stuff, and eight creatures, 4 serpents, 4 Djinns. That's it, all spells. Everybody remembers how obnoxious that deck was to play against, bunch of counter magic and card draw and whatever. But the best versions and the best pilots playing that deck knew that it was a combo deck built around March, and if you can set up a turn where all you need to do is swing once with Djinn, or twice, swing once, they attack you, you just march their team, untap, kill them, or march your Djinn to save it, kill them, like it was almost the combo deck. And this Bant Toxic deck losing the March feels like it's going from a powerful combo deck to suddenly just a mediocre aggro deck. Like, is it even any faster than the other aggro decks? It's got a really bad matchup against the other aggro decks. Like, I don't know. I don't know if it'll survive. I think it depends on if they print some kind of heroic intervention type effect like what you're talking about that can supplant something to save their team, something that targets a bunch of their team with a Rot Priest in play. Like, that was the way you just put 6 poison. It's like doing 8 damage, insane instant speed fireball. So, I don't know.
Heaven forbid you have multiple Rot Priests down. Yeah, that could get out of hand real fast. Yeah.
So losing that March is a big hit. I wonder. I have this deck in like the uncertain in the uncertain bucket. I don't think it's a winner, but despite it not losing much, I think it loses enough that it's not going to be a winner for me anyway. But I don't know how you guys rank it. But there's a bunch of decks. So let's talk about maybe the uncertain decks. Is there any other winners before we move on? I think the one I wanted to mention was Golgari Midrange. I think Golgari Midrange loses 1 dual land, a couple channel lands, but that's it. The strength of that deck is in those awesome Restless Cottages and just being able to, grind people down. Some of the mid-range cards, the stuff along the curve all stays intact, all their creature curve and spells. That deck is going to be a good deck, but it is just a mid-range value deck. So if there are more focused, powerful decks out there, I don't know if this deck's going to be up there. What do you guys think about Golgari?
I think it's still. I completely agree with exactly what you're saying. It's still good. It's a good mid-range value. It's so funny because when I'm playing against that deck, if I'm trying to do just like decent value like aggro or mid-range myself, it is almost impossible to kind of go punch for punch with that deck. But at the same time, exactly what you're saying. Something more powerful, something more focused. If you're trying to execute a combo or something like that, or if you have like a blisteringly fast aggro start against them, they just get blown out. So it'll be really interesting to see kind of where the dust settles. I think whether or not, because I agree the deck is mostly untouched. There's not much, the big hitters are all staying put. It'll be very interesting to see what else is in the meta at the end of the day, because I think that's going to dictate whether or not Golgari sticks around. If mid-range value continues to be, one of the dominant strategies, then I think it's not going anywhere. If there's some big combo decks that can step up and start taking over, then it's going to fall off really hard.
Yeah, I would say, when we were testing for the standard RC in Dallas, there was always different versions of Golgari midrange, and coincidentally, they all still stick around. And by different versions, I mean that are surrounded around the 3 drops you play. So how many Gix? Graveyard Trespassers rotating, so you don't get to play that anymore. But there was Free Strider Lookout, right, from Thunder Junction, and that paired really well with like sort of this crime strategy element, where you could get away with playing Geeses in your deck if you wanted to, but being able to play like Free Strider Lookout into Hostile Negotiator was very powerful. But then there's the versions where you can play Sentinel of the Nameless City, and Breacher of the Schism ended up like falling off for a little bit there, even though that's quite a powerful card. So you can't play all the 3 drops. But they're all very powerful in this Golgari deck. Of course, you get to play Shieldred, and then you had the versions that played Aklazot's Deepest Betrayal. None of those cards are going anywhere. So I guess it's focused around what 3 drops you think are best, and then that changes the rest of your build for the deck. Obviously, if you're playing more the crime strategy, you can go with getting away with playing maybe Gisa instead of Aklazot's. putting Aklazats in the sideboard. Geese is a house once you commit a crime, and the Golgari deck commits very many crimes.
Yeah.
You can even target a permanent and not remove any counters with Glissa, Sunslayer, and commit a crime. So I mean, it's pretty good. And Glissa's a have to kill card, by the way, is a 3-drop.
Yes.
If you don't kill the card, you're probably dead. And that's not even talking about like $30 Gix, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And spoiler alert, Deep Cavern Bat doesn't go anywhere. And surprisingly, Deep Cavern Bat has fallen off favor in the Golgari decks over Caustic Bronco.
The Bronco.
So
sure.
Constantly hitting 3 drops off the top of your deck, your opponent losing 3. You play Glissa on 3 with a Caustic Bronco, saddle, attack, reveal new 3-drop, take 5.
I think that's in response to Blue-White Control being one of the best decks. You need the card advantage, and Bat is not card advantage when they get their card back after they sweep or kill the Bat or whatever. You need to actually draw cards immediately before they can interact, because if you're on the play and they're on the draw and they can't no more lies your Bronco on 2, you immediately get to start piling cards up again. And then you can recover from a Wrath much better and everything. I think the big thing, I've never liked Golgari. I know that opinion is no secret, but I think it's a good deck. I think it's a very good deck. The reason I've never endorsed it as a deck that I think people should, take to a big tournament or whatever, is because of the rest of the metagame. And like Ham said, when you've got Domain, when you've got Temur Fireballs, when you've got decks that are going way over the top of this mid-range deck, it gets trashed. And that's why, when Domain was 20% of the metagame, it was, I was just saying, like, I don't know, even if this deck has a good match against, some of the aggro decks and whatever else, like, I feel like having a bad match against the deck that is dominating the format feels like the worst place to be. But rotation happening, Temur Fireballs is gone, Domain is gone. That suddenly has me more interested, like what Hem was alluding to. The metagame shifting suddenly makes green-black a lot more viable. It is a very powerful, grindy deck that can shift gears. I don't know if you guys remember the Turtle versions. If Graveyard Hate goes away because the Fireballs deck is gone, nobody needs to hate on the graveyards because those Capenna fetch lands are done, 4-color Legends is gone, Temur's gone. Maybe Graveyard Hate gets eased up on, and then suddenly you can go back to this really grindy Turtle thing where they're bringing back creature lands, they're bringing back, like, Desolation. I was going to say Field of Ruin. That rotates, but we still have Desolation Field, and I don't know, there's one other one. You could see a lot of different versions of this deck. Like, I remember the ones with Trespasser. They were tough to beat as well, Trespasser. Yeah, it just depends on what you're expecting to face, right? So, yeah, we'll see. I think Golgari's in a good spot. For the number one reason is, well, yeah, they don't have a lot of stuff that rotates, but also the stuff that preys on them is rotating, and that's a big one that's not immediately apparent. So, anyway, those are my winners. I don't know if you guys have any other ones that you think are going to come out mostly unscathed. So Boros, aggro decks, maybe Monor Red, stuff like that, and Golgari. Is there anything else?
I mean, those are the big ones, in my opinion. Yeah.
I actually don't think Domain goes anywhere. Ooh. I think Domain still remains a very viable deck in Standard. That's for a couple reasons. And I'm not talking about traditional, like, Topiary Stomper into Invasion of Zendikar Domain. Right. I'm talking about Ancient Cornucopia Domain. It would change up a little bit. I agree. I mean, you have the dual lands, right, that are Surveil, that are basic land typed. There are also we have Leyline of the Guild Pact. I'm not saying that the deck would play that card, but the Ancient Cornucopia version would be able to adequately play that card, and also if you were playing Ill-Timed Explosion as one of your main Wrath spells, discarding a useless Leyline to deal 4 damage to the board late game doesn't seem terrible. So I think it still survives. It becomes slower. You can't play a turn 2 Leyline Binding unless you have a Leyline of the Guild Pact in play.
That's fair.
But it's still a great card even to cast for 3 mana, in my opinion, or 2 mana with 3 lands in play.
And I think that's the biggest thing. The argument that I heard from a lot of people saying that this deck is absolutely going away is that, well, now all of a sudden I can't cast Leyline Binding on 2, which, fair. That does hurt the deck, no question. However, I know going up against it, the Leyline on 2 was not the thing that killed me,
Yeah.
So,
it was a Traxon 5.
Exactly, the Traxon 5, and that can still happen.
And also, Leyline got a little bit worse with Pick Your Poison.
True.
So, granted, most people are just playing that as a sideboard card. However, you're talking about a deck that also used the the Topiary Stomper into Invasion Zendikar version, playing like up the beanstalk on 2 to help just generate so much card advantage. The Ancient Cornicopia version doesn't play that card because it's not necessary. But being able to cast a bunch of multicolor cards in that deck, for example, Lightning Helixing a target and gaining 5 life with Ancient Cornucopia out is sick.
I love that you're talking about this. Yeah, dude, I've been playing this all week. I want to talk about this later. I'm playing a Bazaar with Niv Mizzet Supreme.
It's fantastic.
Oh,
it's one of my favorite cards to play.
Anyway,
Love it.
We got to save it. But hold on. Let's talk about the current tier 1. I wanted to say, is Domain even a tier 1 deck here? Domain hasn't put up results in months. It was almost totally, I mean, it was in the Pro Tour, and the people who played it in the Pro Tour were criticized for playing it. Other pros were like, I can't believe you're playing Domain in the Pro Tour. And after that, we just never saw it do anything, in any of the MTGO challenges and any of that other stuff. So you're right. Like, it's funny. We're talking about a deck that's fallen a little bit. Now it's going to lose even more. I agree. This is in my uncertain bucket. I think this deck will survive, but it won't be tier 1, or I don't know. We'll see what happens. But ramping into an Atraxa is still so powerful. Atraxa is one of the best ramp targets we've ever had, and it's still legal in Standard or reanimation targets. So. Yeah.
And was considered for banning as well on the last ban announcement.
Yep, it got called out.
Right.
Yep.
So I like the leyline angle. I also think, yes, I've been playing a ton with Cornucopia, and it's been amazing and everything. There's life gain 5-color decks that'll probably be really good. Just because, again, if aggro's everywhere, especially at the start of a new rotation, it might be good to just jam a bunch of... Because that life gain off Cornucopia is unbelievable. Like, with Lightning Helixes and a bunch of other stuff, like, you're gaining 7 life or whatever off a Helix. If you have a couple of Cornucopias out, it's insane. And not to mention there's a bunch of other multicolored stuff you could play. But I don't know if it's going to be tier 1. Losing those tri-lands is a big deal. The Surveil lands are good, but worse than tri-lands. So I don't know. And being able to cycle them in the late game, like how much... Like, Domain had that way to just, they have a bunch of mana, they draw lands, they're all their lands cycled, and they were able to keep, finding action. Losing that might be something. How does that stack up versus Surveil lands that let you surveil? Like, that's good too, but we won't know until we actually see these decks, seeing play. But so I have it in the uncertain, but I think I agree with you. I don't think it's going anywhere. Leyline and Herd Migration are too powerful, and ramping into an Atraxa, we still have Invasion of Zendikar, we still have Cartographer's Map or whatever they're playing now. Nissa, ramping into a Nissa sweet too, and other stuff. So
I really appreciate. Yeah, I appreciate the question of, is it still good as it is right now? That's honestly something that often gets lost in the conversation, and it's a fair question. Yeah, it's
weird. It's not on top of the metagame now, so we'll see.
Yeah. And speaking about like ramp decks and stuff, I mean, I'm the number one enjoyer of ramp decks here, and between like still being able to cast like Itali Primal Conqueror in Standard, which is totally possible in a number of ways. We've seen a lot of Smuggler Surprise decks recently, Calamity inspired Smuggler Surprise decks. Whether or not you put into play Itali from that card or not, or we have the benefit of having like Terror of the Peaks in Standard at the moment, which is kind of crazy with Itali as well. The Gruul ramp deck started to really make a resurgence at the end of this last Standard format, right? Being able to play like Glimpse the Core into Invasion of Zendikar or into another ramp spell to be able to Smuggler Surprise you, or taking advantage of Spinewood's Armadillo, I think it is, just to be able to search to make sure you're hitting those land drops. Or have another 7/7 to put in play.
I played Standard way back since the Titans were around, and I think this might be the Standard. I've never seen this many insane things to ramp into in the Standard format all at the same time. There's it's a murderer's row of 6 and 7 drops that win the game. Calamity and Atraxa and Vaultborn Tyrant, and now we have the Terror of the Peaks, and it's just like, oh, and then we have a card that cheats them in. Oh man, that's gross. Nobody's playing Storm the Festival. That used to be the way we did it. And Genesis Ultimatum maybe before that, but then it was Storm ramp into Storm. Storm old and busted. All right. The Calamity is insane, and Smuggler Surprise ramping into that and copying, and
Smuggler Surprise, I think, is like I mean, a lot of people are playing it, so I don't think it's underrated necessarily, but I think it is quietly excellent, and a huge part of it is because it's instant speed. The number of control players who have tapped out to Memory Deluge on my end step, and then in response, I hit them with this. Oh, it feels great. Don't let those control players take advantage of your end step. It's your end step.
Anyway. Never tap out control mages. Don't tap out.
Don't do it.
Always leave up that no more lies. Even if you don't have it, bluff. They'll respect it.
Yeah. I know you have to
anyway, it's a very good deck.
I'm gonna hit you for it. Yeah, exactly.
And then let's not even go down this road, but we'll just drop this little Land of War Elves is also coming back to standard at some point. Okay, so I don't want to we have all the complaint equity now. You have none. You get one of the best green cards ever printed back in standard. Ramp decks are going to be ugly. But some other decks in the uncertain category, speaking about control, a lot of people ask me, because I play a lot of control and there's a lot of control players, I guess, who watch my stream, whatever. Is it going to survive? And I think that's a silly question. Of course it's going to survive. I think losing Memory Deluge and Wandering Emperor are obviously hits, but remember, those two cards were legal for years before blue-white was ever a thing. Those are not the cards that made blue-white a good deck in standard suddenly. They were around a long time, and blue-white was never playable. And it wasn't because they didn't have good card draw or Wandering Emperor wasn't good. It's because they didn't have a good early way to interact. Make Disappear was subpar. It was easy to play around, and then it was dead in the late game. And when in a control deck that's creatureless, it didn't do it. It didn't do the thing. No More Lies gets printed, then 3 Steps Ahead gets printed, suddenly blue-white controls a tier 1 deck, not because of those other 4 drops. So those 4 drops are good. When rotation happens, losing the channel lands is a bigger deal in this deck than it is in something like Boros Aggro. Having that Iganjo, I can't tell you how many times I was able to kill some stupid creature that's murdering me, and they have other stuff in counter spell in hand, and I'm just like, Iganjo. Or Otawara, bounce your own Emperor. There was a lot of fun stuff you could do. But that's so that's a hit, but the deck gets to keep its beautiful mana base. It's got the creature land still, it's got Mirrex still, it's got Demolition Field to replace Field of Ruin. Those are all awesome for that deck. Do not underestimate the land destruction in that control deck. It's very important. So they have all that stuff. They have their early interaction with No More Lies Deduce lining up perfectly. They've got 3 steps ahead after that. Memory Deluge is a great card draw spell, but there are a bunch of card draw spells that deck could play. We've already talked about a bunch of them even on this podcast before. And Wandering Emperor is really the most unique card that is being lost. But you've got things like Stoic Sphinx that you could put into that spot. Not quite the same, but a way to finish. People say that Wandering Emperor was the way the deck won in a lot of games, like it was a win con in the deck. It's like, as somebody who played Control a ton, you're 5% of the games or less are you winning with Wandering Emperor. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's usually Jace or Mirrex, or they scoop because they have 0 cards, you have 7, and it's, it's GG. So, I don't know if I mean, it's a hit to the deck, losing Emperor, but I do not think Blue-White Control is going anywhere, and I don't think you should expect that after rotation, suddenly there's not going to be a blue-white based control deck. Maybe it's Jeskai, maybe it's Esper. I think blue-white is still just the best. 2-color is just so much better for a control deck. The mana is so much more important in a control. Or aggro deck too, but control deck being able to consistently make land drops and be able to cast all your double-colored spells. No More Lies is a gold card on 2. You got to be able to cast that stuff. So I think it's not going anywhere. I have it in the uncertain bucket because I'm not sure how good it's going to be, but I don't think it's in the loser bucket for sure. But what do you guys think?
I think blue-white is here to stay. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Carlo. What you got?
I was just going to say it's here to stay. There's got to be some strong control deck in the format to try to counteract like the big rampy decks, but also have the tools to be able to deal with the aggro decks. It's always needs to be a pillar of the standard format. Because if it's not, I think your really aggressive aggro decks take over the format without control. We saw that halfway through like the standard season. There was no real aggro decks that existed. There was no real control deck that existed. And then we had aggro decks start to rise that gave rise to the control decks. And then we had our pillars of the format. So, I think 100% it's here to stay. Emperor is a big loss, but it always finds additional ways to interact.
For sure.
So I think the key cards are still there, but
yeah. Well, in a lot of builds that I've gone up against, I have definitely seen Wandering Emperor and Sunfall being like the key ways that they've been able to like convert patience into damage. So that is gonna Yeah, I agree with everything you guys are saying. And I think it's going to be interesting in how it survives, not whether or not it will. I'm just curious what's going to, what is going to fill those slots, because there are plenty of options. I'm just curious which one is going to end up being the best one. And I think a big part of that's going to be what is Bloomborough bringing to the table and what are going to be the most popular decks that it's trying to answer,
Yeah, that's the funny thing with a control deck. It's what else is good in the format. If that lines up well against sweepers and counter magic, then it's good. So like, when the control deck gets to play 3 or even 4 temporary lockdown main, because there's so many other good aggro decks out there, that makes control so much better. When temporary lockdown isn't as good, then there's a little, like, you have to shave a couple, and then you're kind of soft to the aggro decks. Like, it's much better to just, when those sweepers are good and they're great, then the control deck is good. And it's a byproduct of what everybody else is playing, right? So, yeah, but not losing lockdown, not losing Sunfall, and not losing Get Lost, we're losing March. March is a big one, because being able to hit creature lands is a big deal, and little, like enchantments and non-creature permanents. You've still got your land destruction, but like against a deck like green-black or something, God, I end up relying heavily on March to clean up, one mana just hitting a creature land was wide cease play in Pioneer and other formats still, but yeah, so I don't know, losing that's a hit, but Get Lost is still such a good removal spell, and then there's other white removal you could play, so yeah, we'll see if the deck makes it back to tier 1. I don't know if it will, but
it's funny that you mentioned sweepers, because now that I'm thinking about it, the last time Domain was just absolutely top of the heap, it was running like 6 main deck sweepers, and they were good, I think you're onto something there.
Yeah, and then the question is, how many Wrath spells do they print in Bloomborough?
Yeah. I mean,
Day of Judgment in Bloomborough.
We were talking about Llanowar Elves. Day of Judgment's coming back as well. That's a huge upgrade. All those 4-mana Wraths have been bad. Your opponent gets to draw a card, or like, they had these conditions on them. Day of Judgment's just kill all the things. That's huge for 4 mana. That's great.
I mean, so Wrath of Gods in Standard, everybody. It's coming back. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be really weird to see what happens when Foundation drops. And we've only seen a few cards from that set. I mean, if they print a bunch of other, like, these are almost like these staple cards. Like, I know Negate, Duress, these kind of effects, every rotation of Standard needs to have, every few sets has to have these cards to make sure they're always legal in Standard. But this Foundation set, I imagine it's going to be a bunch of that stuff, but also, is Llanowar Elves in that group now? We always have to have a 1-mana ramper, or always have to have a 4-mana sweeper? That's interesting. It's almost like they're like, yes, we need these in the format to do what Carla was saying and make sure these pillars are well funded, well represented, so that they can have good decks and field good, decks.
And that actually sounds like a topic that I need to write down for a future show that we can dive into. Like, what other cards do we want in foundations? Like, what are the foundational cards that would make for a good standard? That we could go. That could be hours of hours of fun for sure. Yeah.
Well, are there any other decks that are tier 1 that you guys think are uncertain, that may or may not, be winners here? Because otherwise we're just on to the losers, and it's pretty easy to just call those out, I think. Anything else? No? So what do you think is a loser here? I mean, the obvious ones, I think, are Temur Fireballs, all the Capenna lands decks. Yep. So Temur Fireballs, 4-color Legends, Slogurk's rotating. Obviously, the Channel lands rotating. That deck is finished. But that said, I think Rona and Inti are so good together in that 4-color Legends deck. And Relic of Legends is still legal, and that card it has shown it can be really busted. I think that package, there might still be a Legends deck depending on the mana fixing and stuff. There's a lot of powerful Legends in Standard. They keep printing so many Legends. So
many commanders.
Commanders. I didn't want to say the C word, but that's okay.
I'll say it.
So,
but no, that's exactly right. And it's funny, we keep talking about that deck as a Slogurk deck, but I've seen lists that have like 2 Slogurk, and it doesn't really seem to be the core of the deck. So really
interesting.
Yeah, like some of the ones I've seen. I don't know if it's regardless, I think you're exactly right. It's really the point, though. I think Relic of Legends, Rona, Inti, like that base has really got really good. Maybe they lean more into like Anim Pakal, maybe Pia Nalar, that kind of thing. Like maybe there's something there, right? They pivot to be a little more aggro, like add a little bit more early pressure, and who knows, maybe. But I agree that there's a lot of power, and like Urtai is one of the key pieces of removal and like key pieces of interaction that deck uses. That's not going anywhere. Yeah. So I mean,
is Plaza of Heroes from Dominaria? I can't remember.
It
Plaza
is.
It is still around, and we've still got Oh, Thalia's rotating with Innistrad Blocker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, never mind.
Until
so
Foundations.
because there's I remember playing.
Don't you say that, Han.
But yeah, like I remember those old Esper Legends decks that played like 28 creatures, and but I don't know. They were relying on fetch channel lands a lot as well. So I don't know. The deck might change. We'll see what those Legends decks look like. But Teamer Fireballs is finished. That said, again, the core is still like you've got the Analyst, you've got Nissa still legal. We saw how powerful those two cards were specifically together because Nissa fetches the Analyst. So you've got that core still, but without the fetch lands, like there's Evolving Wilds, there's Terramorphic Expanse, there's stuff like that, but that's never going to be good enough. Do you think they would...
The fact that Aftermath will bring those in tapped means that you don't get those double Nissa triggers right away. The sack on enter for those Capenna lands is so clutch to what that deck's doing. Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything that would possibly ever but Analyst is still so self-contained and powerful. I still think this card could see play in a Reanimator shell or whatever. It won't look anything like these Teamer Fireballs decks, but so that deck is donezo. Teamer Fireballs finished. Sell your World Souls Rages. They're never coming back. I don't know. Maybe they will, but unlikely. The Legends deck is done. Raffine. Raffine's the big one. So Raffine is done, which is great. A lot of people. It's been the most played deck in Standard for the last 3 years. Raffine has put more. I think more over all the Pro Tours that happened since this card got printed. More people registered Raffine than any other deck. Yeah. That was, I think, even over the Grixis when Fable and all that stuff was legal too. So this deck's been amazing for a long time. Raffine's finally gone. So how does this affect Esper? There's still a bunch of, Dennick's gone, but there's still a bunch of other great 2-drops and everything in these colors. But I was saying, you've got Dimir Tempo. Dimir Tempo is very much like Esper Raffine. They're very similar, but the Tempo version's just a little bit more streamlined, more low to the ground. And the reason to be white was to go a little bit bigger than the Dimir deck, and white generally had the advantage in that matchup because Raffine and Wedding Announcement and these kind of cards. But those cards are all gone. So my question is, when people ask, is the Esper deck going to survive? I ask, why are we playing white? Why are we playing Esper when we could just be playing Dimir? So what do you guys think? Ham, you go first here. I shouldn't have said both of you. You both talk at the same time. So Ham, go.
My big question is Virtue of Loyalty enough to merit going into white? Because I feel like that's the big stopping power that this deck has in the top end that's sticking around. If this isn't worth it, then hard pass. I'm going to go Dimir with that build, because I think you're exactly right. I mean, we've seen the Dimir deck, kind of step in and become popular even with Raffine as an option. So the moment Raffine is not an option, well, then it's probably just the best choice. But Virtue's here, and you can still do a lot of stuff with that. But if you're going to be building that, would it make more sense to use a different support package? Why would you necessarily? Is there just an Orzhov deck then? And I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where, because right now the Esper deck has so many amazing pieces in it. We've got. Well, it's funny. Right now, you could build Esper midrange a bunch of different ways. What 2-drops and 3-drops do you have in there? I feel like Deep Cavern Bat, the stock drops dramatically because it just combos so well with Raffine specifically. Yeah. The moment that support's gone, I think the Bat is, pretty rough, honestly. And I'm not just saying that as somebody who is sick of getting hit by the Deep Cavern Bat while I'm trying to pull off some janky combo and I'm not running anywhere near enough removal. I think I'm definitely that guy. It's good,
but it's just not as busted as it was with Raffine.
It was
not
insane.
Bat is still good.
It is a good card. I'm not saying it's awful. I'm just saying it's nowhere near as strong as it has been.
Yeah.
So the question is it worth it still over other options? I don't know, maybe, but But it'll be interesting to see kind of what shakes out, because I think there are mid-range decks to be had that are leveraging all the same pieces. Yep. But nothing like the current Esper deck, I think, is going to
look at the white cards. Dennick and Raffine can go because they're rotating, but the other white cards that are not rotating are Wandering Emperor is gone. You've got No More Lies. They're playing as a counter spell, and that is an excellent counter spell, but not you don't need to be going to white for something like that, right? Virtue is one of them, and then what are the other white cards? Wedding Announcement's gone, Emperor's gone, Raffine is gone. So is it just that one card? I don't know. I don't know if that's enough, but we'll see. But Ferretto, what do you think?
I mean, I agree with the Dimir is just better here. You still get to play Deep Cavern Bat into Gix, which is still very powerful. Yeah. That's free card draw. Gix is just a powerful card. You still get to play Shieldred on 4, and then your choice of if you want to play a 5-drop or not. You can play Gisa if you are going to commit crime route, or you can play Aclazotz. One card that I love that you still get to play is Fairy Mastermind. I've been a fan of that card since you've been able to play it, especially if your opponent is trying to draw multiple cards for some reason. Fairy Mastermind paired with Bat and Gix and adequate 2-drop and 1, 2, and 3-drop removal spells is just icing. We don't lose Cut Down. We have Long Goodbye plus Go for the Throat plus Shoot the Sheriff plus Bitter Triumph. In Dimir, you get to play counter spells like 3 Steps Ahead, which is an insane magic card, by the way. If you still want to play the counter spell route, you lose Make Disappear, but you get Phantom Interference, which still counters a spell unless you pay 2, and you can make a 2/2 flyer.
So you lose Spell Pierce. Spell Pierce is a card they play to good effect, which they're losing, and there's no real
gone, right? Yeah,
but it is, and it's not a big deal, but it is a card they play in the main deck. And so you're right, though. I love this replacement. Phantom Interference for Make Disappear feels great. So losing Spell Pierce not a big deal, I think, but the blue is really important for these tempo decks, and so I don't think the question is, do you cut blue? I don't know. The black-white, it has me interested, what Ham mentioned. Is there a space for an Orzhov deck? Because all the cards you mentioned are double black. Gix, Shouldred, Aclazotz, Gisa, literally all of them. And you want black early for cut down and go for the throat and all that stuff. So is the counter magic the route to go? I think if you're low to the ground tempo, and Fairy Mastermind is so good, I don't know. I still think it's better paired with blue, but
I think eventually you'll gravitate towards having a Selesnya or green-white tokens deck, considering some of the spoilers they've shown for Foundations, one of them being an Anthem effect for 2 mana in green and white. And that would pair really well with the White Virtue. You'll still be able to play Skrell's Hive if you want early token generation, right? I mean, granted, you lose the life and you get mites that can't block.
But and there's Mondrak, and there's you could do the go wide thing, but is that ever going to be good in a world with temporary lockdown legal? I don't know. That's the problem. It's the sweepers that get you. It's why that card, that archetype has never really existed in standard, because it's so hard to survive the sweepers. So you've either got to touch blue for counter magic, or you've got to, the only deck that played Skrell's Hive had March of Otherworldly Light that could save all of its dudes. So once. Or not Otherworldly Light, the blue one, Swirling Mist. So, once all that's gone, I don't know. The go wide thing has always struck me as a precipice. You're walking this line, hoping that you're not playing into the sweeper, because if you do, you fall off. That's it. You're done.
Right. Yeah. Well, you're putting your opponent in a situation where the targeted removal is not great. And it's even a lot of the counter spells, a lot of 1-for-1 is not amazing against go wide strategies, unless you can hit a token doubler or an Anthem. That's money. But otherwise, but the sweepers, man, exactly. You put your opponent in a position where you just sweeper check. If you have the sweeper, you probably win this. If you don't, I probably win this. And I don't know, is that a good spot to be?
It's interesting.
It's rough these days. That's for sure.
I think. Well, look at what Boros does. They play War Leader's Call, which is an Anthem, but they explode so quickly out of the gate that it doesn't matter if you have a sweeper. I'm going to kill you on turn 3 on the play. So that's the way to beat the sweeper, is to kill them before they cast it, which is very hard to do.
Yep.
Boros can pull it off, but a green-white deck is almost certainly going to be less explosive than something like Boros. Or even Dimir, or... Yeah, a lot of black-white Orzhov. I think that the Dimir tempo deck is effective because it's low to the ground. As soon as you go Orzhov, you're slowing down, which makes you worse against the other decks playing the slower decks. They're going to go over top of you before you can kill them, right? So anyway, it's interesting. I think Esper's done. I don't know why you would play those 3 colors right now. It doesn't make sense to me. In a aggro kind of tempo deck like Raffine used to be. You control and other archetypes, sure, but I don't think the Esper aggro tempo deck is going to exist post board. So don't invest in that stuff.
I think that's probably right. I think that's probably right. A lot of the pieces that are in that deck will find other homes, but they're not going to look the same. Yeah. No, I think
that's most of tier 1. I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to touch on in terms of winners, losers, or uncertain decks. I think we've covered most of them. So if you'd like to move on, we've got some stuff happening. There was one Bloomborough card that got spoiled recently.
A single card. Spoiled. Indeed.
It's
and they showed art for this one at MagicCon Chicago, and now we actually get to see the card.
Yes.
And it's Hugs, Grizzly Guardian, who it's I kind of identify with this guy. So he's a Badger Warrior, 5/5 for X red green. So could be a 5/5 for 4 with trample. And when Hugs Grizzly Guardian enters, exile the top X cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards, and you may play an additional land on each of your turns. So how do we feel about this one, gentlemen?
They keep printing card draw in green. It's bizarre. It's like Hydroid Krasis, but it doesn't trigger on cast, but it's, way more expensive. But, Hydroid, you had to double the X, though, right?
But you also get double land drop.
It's not Hydroid Krasis. That card's way better. I'm just saying it's weird.
Escape, what is it? Escape to the Wilds and Hydroid Krasis and smash them together. You kind of get this. It's
something like that.
It's interesting. Yeah.
What do you guys think? I think this card should have banding, missed opportunity.
Ooh, agreed.
Anyway,
I think it's okay. It's just like it's still like a series of those okay cards. One, it's legendary, so like you can't abuse it by playing multiple copies unless you do want to sack one. If you pay 5 for this 5/5 and you get to exile the top card, that doesn't seem terrible. I mean, I almost never want to cast this for 4 mana for a 5/5 trampler that lets you play an additional land. You might as well just play Slunkin if you're trying to ramp, or play like Kellen that is Simic that lets you play an additional. I'm sorry, lets you play an additional land, right? Investigates lets you play an additional land.
Yeah, the adventure.
So I mean, this card is fine if you have a bunch of stuff to ramp into, and you're like, okay, well, what other payoff can I hit off of this? Right. I guess I am of the opinion that I'd rather just play more payoff cards than play cards that search for the payoff cards when they're this much mana to play.
Yes.
Ham, what do you think?
I think if there's some kind of Jund mid-range deck that shakes out, this is like a one of, because if you top deck it late in the game and you got a bunch of mana lying around, keep dig and set up a next turn that's going to be really explosive with a 5/5 body online, which isn't nothing. Like, okay, like I think that's fine, but I don't think we have anything like that in standard. And honestly, I don't think the game is played like that anymore. The game's just not that slow these days, and so I feel like there was a time where if this came out 3-4 years ago, it'd be great, and it's just by today's standards, it just fits into an awkward slot that we kind of don't need right now.
Yeah. I mean, maybe what they will do is it's an indication that they want to slow standard down, given the rotation happening at this moment, and maybe them considering that the format would be slower. I would think that they would need to ban Knight Errant of Eos for this, because it doesn't beat the Convoke deck.
Rotate more cards that might help. But anyway, so,
right.
I think it's a commander card. I think it's totally. For all the reasons you guys mentioned. I don't like X in the cost of cards. That if I'm cheating in a giant green dude, I want him to not have X, because if I'm cheating him in, like, this doesn't work with Smuggler Surprise, it doesn't work with reanimation stuff. Like that's why Atrax is busted, and these other cards. Like, having X in your cost means I can't hit you off a tally and you do the full thing. Like I have to pay the X. This is not.
Right.
So, no. Yeah. Sorry, Hugs. You're
exactly. If the X wasn't there and the card draw mode wasn't there, if it was just a 5/5 trample that gives you an extra land drop per turn for 4, I would never play it.
Or if it ETB'd and drew you 2 or exile the top 2 cards and then it would be better, because I could cheat it in and it would still get cards and replace itself. But again, that X means I can't like break that. So not amazing.
Yeah, agreed. Character looks fun though. I definitely want to party with Hugs if that's worth anything. Yeah.
So speaking of spoilers, I mean, that was the one we just got from Bloomborough. Last week you guys talked about all the ones that came down the pipe for Duskmourn, for Foundation, which was announced, and all this stuff. We just had Assassin's Creed come out. I've heard good things from the people who bought the cards. They said that it kind of fits, and these things always make me think, oh boy, this is going to be ham-fisted. They're going to jam, this kind of thing into Magic. But a lot of them, Warhammer was great. Doctor Who seemed pretty great. Like, they all managed to kind of fit. So I haven't gotten any of these cards? You guys have. So, Carlo, you were saying you bought some of this. Is it cool? Is it good? You like it?
Yeah, I mean I will preface this by saying I only have bought in collector boosters. That's because I don't really have an interest buying a 7-card booster pack after Aftermath, but that's just me.
No, that's not just
you know, and it's more more money for a Beyond booster than it is your traditional standard pack, still for less cards. So, for cards that honestly mostly won't have an impact on Modern, they're just not strong enough. Some of the cards are okay, might be playable. I know Aspiring Spike just top 8'd at MTGO Challenge with the blue-black assassin. It literally costs 2 mana. When it deals damage, you get to put a counter on it. So I mean, maybe we've got a couple cards that are Modern playable. I mean, the biggest thing I think out of the Assassin's Creed set, honestly, is some of the reprints that haven't been reprinted in some time, like Temporal Trespass. We haven't seen since Fate Reforged. So, you know, we get that extra turn spell again. There was a reprint of Sword and Feast and Famine. Check this out. I opened up a foil Sword of Feast and Famine in the full art variant.
Oh, wow.
And I got out of a pack, and that's pretty decisive.
Nice.
Another card that hasn't been reprinted in some time is Cover of Darkness.
That one's great. I'm glad
we've got one of these. Cover of Darkness is an enchantment for 1 and a black. And when it enters, you choose a creature type, and that creature type has fear. That hasn't been reprinted since its original set. So, you know, we have cards like that.
Yeah.
The other thing that really came out big from Assassin's Creed that people want is textured cards. So they continued that in this set. And the textured cards are worth quite a bit of money. Second to that of the serialized cards, of course. They did come out with serialized historical figures, so like Leonardo da Vinci, Cleopatra, Socrates, Mary and Anne Bonny. For example, there are serialized versions of those cards, so those are desired. I think it's like 500 of each of those 4, so there's 2,000 serialized cards total out of the set. So again, only collector booster exclusives.
And the serialized versions of the historical figures are in their native language, like a language that individual spoke, which is interesting.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
Okay, fun fact. Sorry, but I'm going to interject here because I just learned this recently. Do you know who the very first actual person was to appear on a legit Magic card in a Magic set? The first actual human. Do you know him? Who is it? Do you know?
Albert Einstein.
Einstein, yeah.
It was Einstein, really?
Yeah, the Legends card. I think something of the Master, Way of the Master, or something of the Master.
Yeah,
I can't remember. Yeah, and I remember seeing the card too.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like a blue enchantment or sorcery or something like that. Yeah. Anyway, really interesting because now we've got Da Vinci and all these other Presence of the Master. That's it.
Yes.
That's it. Yeah.
Interesting.
I was like, whoa! I thought. Yeah, for some reason I thought it was like Richard Garfield's card or one of those goofy things, but no, that was in an actual set. Was Einstein? Yeah. Anyway, that's cool. So they're printing all this stuff. You know, I really love the fact that they're reprinting all these old cards that haven't been printed in a long time. Oh, it's white. It's a white enchantment.
It's a white enchantment
Presence
for 4.
Of the Master.
While Presence of the Master is play, any new enchantment casts are countered. Yeah. So the Oracle text on it is whenever a player casts an enchantment spell, counter it. Just counters all of their enchantments.
Was a hell of a time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Back in my day. All right. But yeah, so these Assassin's Creed cards, I mean, I love that they are doing that. That is the vehicle. Universes Beyond should be a vehicle for not just like capitalizing on some IP, but also print some of these old cards back into circulation so they're not stupid expensive. And for Carlos flashing Ezio and Altair. Ooh, we got
Ezio and Altair, the protagonists.
Both those guys.
Yeah, exactly. The characters from Assassin's Creed 1 and 2. The characters that people remember because, you know, they're not named Desmond Miles. Anyway, yeah.
Anyway, but this leads us to kind of the next point, which is Assassin's Creed just came out. As that's dropping, we're getting spoilers from not 1, not 2, but 3 upcoming new sets that are all releasing in the next 4 to 5 months. We've got Bloomburrow right around the corner on July 30th on Arena, and then I believe August 2nd in real life it comes out, right?
Is the official launch. Yeah.
And then Duskmorn a month later, in September. Well, the end of September, so like almost 2 months, but
It's
a month
just
and a
shy
half,
of 2
whatever.
months, but yeah.
But that is tight. That is so we're already getting spoilers for a set that comes after the next set that hasn't even dropped yet. And then Foundations in November. So this is a lot of stuff coming out.
And this is happening, like, Assassin's Creed just dropped. Like, as we're recording this, the official release was 2 days ago. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm still exploring Modern Horizons 3, which just came out like a month ago.
Yeah,
so, like,
on Arena.
Holy cow.
Interestingly enough, the marketing for it, I don't know how many of y'all were paying attention to it, but the day that Modern Horizons 3 released, pre-release weekend, literally, all of the Wizards accounts were promoting Assassin's Creed coming out that day. Instead of saying, Modern Horizons 3 is out, go get it now, it was, here is what's coming next, Assassin's Creed. And I was like, don't I want to enjoy Modern Horizons 3, which has, honestly, it's been much more enjoyable to open those booster packs, because like cards you'd probably actually play in like the constructed formats outside of Commander. And yeah, I totally get like the product fatigue aspect of it. What I'll tell you though, what I hate the most is the particular time period between Bloomburrow and Duskmorn, because we get a fresh standard rotation, and I only get to play 4 weeks of new standard with Bloomburrow before we have to introduce a whole nother set. There's not even
I didn't even think about that.
There's not even time for content creation to decide what's the new standard format look like, because 2 major things happen right after Duskmorn releases. One is there is a regional championship that is Pioneer in Washington, D.C. Okay, so that's introduced the week after Duskmorn enters. So two new sets, only 1 week to test with the new set in Pioneer format, and 2... Worlds, which is in Las Vegas at MagicCon, is standard. Yeah. So you only have when Duskmorn releases at the end of September, you have 1 month with 2 brand new sets in standard with a fresh rotation.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you're gonna see things happen quickly. You're going to see people working on standards so feverishly that I imagine the format is just going to be it's going to be a gong show for the first couple of weeks, but by the time Worlds rolls around, I don't know, it'll be very interesting to see where we've arrived.
So Worlds happens then, and now they've thrown this wrench into it where 2 weeks after Worlds, a new standard set will enter. So I can't even test what decks were good coming out of Worlds for 2 weeks to determine what's good in standard, because I've got a fresh set that drops.
Yeah.
And I'm not against the set like Foundations coming out. I actually think that's fantastic. I would rather players play with their cards longer. And I was the person who was pessimistic about a 3-year standard rotation, because Foundation breaks that rule. It's legal until at least 2029. And so they said it could be legal longer. They left that disclaimer open, by the way.
Yeah.
So, which is totally fine. So if I want new players to come to Magic, Foundation's the set I want for them. But like, how are we supposed to test new standard? Because after Modern RCQ season is over, and that starts in 3 weeks from this recording, we'll go back to standard RCQ season, which will be during this very awkward time period where all 3 of these sets are entering the standard format. I can't even test for RCQs like this. In my opinion, they should make the next 6 months after the Modern season standard and ignore Pioneer for 6 months and say, okay, let's try to establish the metagame, more standard events, including an extended RCQ season, even if they want to make it two standard RCQ seasons back to back so I can test these new cards. If not, what's the point?
I agree. Carlo, I've never seen you this worked up before.
I'm sorry,
totally
but,
discombobulated.
You're
absolutely right. I agree with everything you said.
It makes it just makes it very difficult. Like I can't and for y'all and I don't currently write articles, but for y'all writing articles, this has to be so difficult. Because your deck that you write about this week is then irrelevant the next week.
Well, and this is the problem.
It's crazy.
Yeah, we just spent an hour talking about what's rotating. And one of the reasons we touched on this partially is because a longtime listener, I know he's somebody who watches a lot of our streams, asked the question in our Discord and said, hey, what's happening during the rotation? This is the number one question we get asked all the time as content creators. What's going to be good next week? What's going to be good after rotation? What should I spend my money on? My wild cards and everything. You know this game more than I do, right? Tell me. And as a content creator, what you're saying here is absolutely true. It's impossible to recommend really anything because the format's going to be in a constant state of flux for the next, I don't know how many months after rotation. So it gets tough to tell people what's good and what isn't because things change. Now, that makes it difficult. And it's why people ask me for deck lists. Like, I wrote an article and I kind of tried to paint things in broad strokes. And people are like, well, what are these decks going to look like? Give me a list. And I'm like, I can't do that. I can't. You shouldn't try and be making a list because there's way too many other factors that are still unknown yet before we can even think about lists.
Right.
But just even speaking in broad terms, it's hard to kind of tell. Is Control going to be viable after Duskmoor, after this? Well, every set that comes out is going to have an impact. The one other side to this coin, I think, is Standard is massive. It's bigger than it's ever been. It's got so many sets, and I've talked about this before when they initially announced the 3-year rotation and what the impact of that is. When you have 12 sets in Standard, adding a 13th set is usually not going to be super impactful. When you have a 5-set Standard and you add a 6th set, that's a big deal. When you have how many? So 5 sets are rotating. We're still going to have 8 sets legal, or 9 with the addition of Bloomburrow. 10 with the addition of Duskmourn. How much of an impact is a set like Duskmourn going to have on a 10-set Standard? I mean, maybe Wizards is banking on the fact that these sets are going to be less impactful than they normally would because of this expanded card pool that we're dealing with in Standard. Maybe that's part of the reason why they do this. Like, is Standard really going to fluctuate dramatically when the best decks are probably going to stay the best decks? That said, we saw new decks pop up even right at the end of a 12-year Standard rotation, so it's so hard to tell, right? So, I mean, I'm just saying there is light at the end of this tunnel, maybe, if these sets... But then what does that even mean? If a set's not impactful, why are people buying it? Why is it, like, does it even... What's the point of making sets that are not, if less than 5% of the cards are going to see play? Sorry, I'm rambling. What do you guys think?
It's funny you mentioned that because, I've been taking a break from Standard because things have gotten so stale. And it's funny, I went back not too long ago and looked back at the meta share and realized actually a deck we didn't even talk about that has become very popular, at least on Arena, in the last couple of months, is a Simic aggro list using a lot of artifacts.
Oh, right.
Simic
cookies, yeah.
Yeah, the Simic Cookies deck, exactly. Like, I stepped away for a minute and came back, and that was everywhere. It's like, wait a minute, what happened? And no new cards came in. People just realized, like, wait a minute, this sequence is, like, fire. This is legit.
Yeah.
Turns out Schooner's pretty good. But anyway, Schooner and Glyph, not bad. You're exactly right. Like, these things, there is a lot of room to move and a lot of stuff going on. And, with it being huge, I think you're exactly right. I think these new sets aren't going to have a huge impact right away, but because they're going to stick around for so long, people will find, tech within them that we'll be able to play with for a long time in various shells. So
these sets have been designed for the 3-year rotation now. For anybody not sure, I know Mark Karlov Manor wasn't, but I believe with OTJ that start set, right? Was it that?
I think that was in development, and they knew that it was going to be.
They knew. I
think that's right. Yeah.
So that's another thing, like they know what they're, please, I hope they know what they're doing. I think they, so maybe these sets are going to be power crept to the point where they are going to be impactful in Standard. Like that, we just don't know. We just know that these are designed for a 3-year rotation. And I assume Foundations isn't something they just decided to do. So they must have had that in the mix as well when designing some of this, right?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
We'll see. But... yeah, it is coming fast and furious. Like, just these sets back-to-back, what Freddo was saying, when you actually look at the dates and how they line up with the major tournaments in the RCQ seasons, it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, the pros have their work cut out for them, which, hey, I don't feel bad for them or anything, don't get me wrong, but I do feel bad for the players asking me where they should put their money and what I recommend, because I want to give them actionable advice, and you just can't when things change that rapidly, right?
Well, now let's take a look at our majority of our audience, which is Arena players.
Okay, right.
Okay. How are the Mastery Passes going to work on Arena? Because if I got 3 sets dropping within a month of each other in a month and a half, that's not even long for your traditional Mastery Pass season.
Oh, no.
So, 1, are they going to alter that? 2, is it going to be worth it to buy it, considering it goes away within a month for 2 sets in a row, right?
Yeah.
So will you play enough Arena in a month to unlock the full benefit from those packages, whatever they should be?
Yeah.
That's another thing. 2, you're now asking people, let's say if you're somebody like me, and I'll tell you straight up, every time a new set comes out, I always buy the package. That's the 50 packs, because it's a great jumpstart into the new set. And I always buy the Mastery Pass, and I always buy the draft and sealed token one, because I love to draft when the new sets come out. I think it's a great way to get new cards. And how many gems you can save up after free rolling those tokens is great, right? Personally, I haven't crafted any cards because I've been set complete from OTJ for what seems like a month now, because I couldn't get the big score cards from that, and that's a whole nother conversation. We spoke about that before on the podcast. And so I have so many rares, but very few mythics saved up, right? Because of the whole big score problem. But I have a lot of rares. I have like 70 some rares. Or something like this, which is going to help within the next set coming out. But you're asking the arena player who would do that, so normally buy like the 50 pack package, to do that for 3 months in a row now, as opposed to 2 months.
Yeah.
So we're now asking, spend your expendable income 3 months in a row instead of giving you like that month break. Which is going to be difficult for some folks, and their wild cards that they currently have are not going to be able to be spread as wide anymore because of the consistent releases like that.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it makes it like collect. Or sorry, Ham, yeah.
Oh no, I completely agree, and it's that also as a content creator is tough to acknowledge, because like for me, I buy them too. Like I buy all those pre-order ones. I usually wait until like the day before they go live, so I don't have the little thing blink, like lit up on my on my overlay for a month or whatever. But yeah, I'm with you, but as a content creator, like that's office supplies. Like I'm going to be using those cards every day, and I'm writing that off on my taxes. Like, is it, are you going to get the same amount of value from as a consumer? So that's always my thing is like, well, how much of Arena are you going to be playing? Are you going to unlock at least, 50, 60 levels of this thing? If not, I wouldn't recommend it, that's always the rule on those. So,
well, I've always recommended people buy the battle pass. You are getting more than your gem value worth, assuming you get to a certain level. But most people can achieve that, and it is worth it. And you should always do it. And I would always tell people that. But like Freddo said, I think that could change now. I don't know how they're going to change the battle pass, but I can't imagine they're going to leave it like the way it is. It's got to adapt somehow to this this kind of increased cadence of set releases. It's so much coming out so quickly, and we've said this for a while now. I mean, it feels like spoiler season. There used to be breaks between spoiler seasons. Now, and earlier this year and maybe last year, it's just been spoiler season ends, new spoiler season begins. Now it's like they're overlapping, like they're actually like all overlapping. There's so many, which is
imagine
wild.
What it will look like now when we have Bloomborough in for 2 weeks, and on that second week we start getting Dustmorn spoilers. Nobody's paying attention to Bloomborough anymore.
Well, I thought Assassin's Creed was old news. Like I didn't think it literally came out 2 days ago. Like it was not available on shelves until 2 days ago, and it feels like old news right now. That is nuts. Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. I mean, I think the only way this really changes is when people speak with their wallets. Somebody like you, Favretto, who spends a lot of money on not only real life cards but also on Arena. At some point, it will not be viable for you to do this anymore. I don't know. I don't care how much money people make in their personal finances. It's irrelevant. Yep. Is it worth it to keep doing this? Like, I mean, it's players like yourself who are used to doing this kind of stuff. What are the odds of being set complete? Like for collectors and stuff, people who really focus on that aspect of the game, which is a big part of Magic. I've known many collectors first, players second kind of people. And you just can't. How you're getting set complete? There's players coming over from Hearthstone and other formats going, oh, well, I want to get like all the cards in the thing. And I'm like, no. I'm like, but wait, this is a TCG, right? The collector. And I'm like, no, well, I don't know how much money you have, but it's going to cost you a fortune. Like, don't even bother. That's not an attainable goal for a typical player. Like, and it just gets harder and harder. Yeah, all this product coming out. So we'll see how it goes. I know. When they had their stock, when Hasbro's stock was devalued or whatever, it was downgraded by some agency. I can't remember the
Bank of
acronym
America
for it. That was Bank of America, yeah, the BOA.
Yeah.
So they said one of the reasons was product fatigue and the issue, the consequence of that on the consumer base and how it's going to affect revenue. And instead of kind of maybe taking that into consideration and backing off a little bit, they actually increased the cadence of the set releases. So I don't know where this is headed, but it doesn't seem sustainable to me, but we'll see, I guess. It's a wild time to be playing Magic. I can't imagine what it's like as a new player jumping in. You just must be totally overwhelmed, right? Even just on Arena, never mind in real life with all the secret layers and all the commander stuff that we haven't even talked about, like all that.
Well, but clearly the marketing's working. I don't know about you guys, but I've gotten a lot of questions over the last couple of weeks saying, hey, I'm a new player, where do I start? And honestly, that's a tough question to answer these days, which is why I'm so glad Foundations is coming out, because that's going to be a very clear. This is where pick up a couple of these, whatever Or I'm hoping there are starter decks, standard starter decks with that product. Pick up one of these and upgrade it. Go, you're good. I think that kind of thing would be huge. So hopefully that's what's going to happen there. Because right now it's like download Arena and make sure you like the game and figure out what color you like to play and go from there. And
try and give them as many tips on saving money as possible. To go and get the Arena codes and go do this and buy the battle pass and try to this is how you do it efficiently. But, it's funny. I'm thinking of Modern, and I'm thinking, how many Modern players are going to be drained away from Modern and pulled into Standard because of what's happening in Modern right now at the same time as Standard? Standard, I'm going, look, they made a 3 rotation. They're talking about foundations. They're very clearly trying to build value into the format to show people, hey, don't worry, I know you're going to spend $200 here, but don't worry, your cards will be good for a long time. These sets come out and bannings happen here and there, but after what just happened in Modern Horizons 3 completely flipping the entire metagame on its head. Like, none of the decks that existed pre-Modern Horizons 3 are even on the table anymore. That is the most insane rotation. People who spend $100 on Ragavans are now going, what? This is worth $40 now? Like, oh my god, and I can't even play it.
Imagine
this kind of stuff.
Them reprinting that card 2 or 3 times after the fact it becomes $100.
And they print these brand new cards and then within a year reprint them twice. So, it's like they knew what they were doing when they printed this.
It's hilarious because this is what led to an influx of Modern players. Just before the pandemic, when Throne of Eldraine Standard was a gong show and they had to do a bunch of bans and everybody's like, this is ridiculous. A lot of players jumped ship to Modern. And now you have a bunch of Modern players going, wait a minute, I spent the $1,000 on this deck. Now you're telling me it's unplayable because you released a new set? And wait, you're going to put one of these out every 2 years? Wait a minute, I thought this was the set. This is where my cards keep their value. Nope. So at the same time this is happening in Modern, you've got them going, hey, look, Standard is high value. Standard, this is us investing in the format to make sure that people's cards hold their value. Do you think there's going to be a swing of players coming into Standard from Modern and stuff like that? I don't know. Redo's shaking his head. No, why not?
No, I think folks are going to play the formats in paper that are whatever the RCQ season anyway. I think this is significantly different in paper than it is obviously playing Arena or Magic Online, just because of resources that are available.
But those are the highly competitive players, right? Those aren't the average player. Those are the players who are RCQing and stuff.
Yeah, I also think those players who are going at your normal FNM or your casual player aren't playing, for the most part, multiple formats if it's not Modern and Commander or Standard and Commander. I think Commander is always going to be the universal format that anybody or everybody who's a casual player will play, as long as they're not Thassa's Oracling you by turn 4. But
those are totally casual games.
Yeah. Sure, yeah. But I think it's a great time for people to get into Standard in general. I think the only way that you keep value in your Modern decks anymore is if some random deck seems to top 8 a tournament and it's of a card from a set that's hard to acquire cards from, and it all of a sudden spikes. For example, Soul Spike in the Necro Dominance deck is from Cold Snap and is now $80 to $100 a card.
Crazy. I know.
I think that's the only way you gain value or equity in your Modern collections anymore, because your cards that have been worth money, like the One Ring that's now $150 or something like this, $100 a pop, it's different. It's different with each set. Whether or not Wizards can actually pre-print the One Ring, is
you're right,
is
and
question.
Yeah, $100 a pop, and yeah. Within, I like that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They're gonna go universe within with it, and
people forgot about the One Ring because everybody's talking about the Nadu, that bird. And meanwhile, One Ring 339 copies in the Pro Tour, 339. Every deck that wasn't playing the Bird Wizard were all playing quad One Rings, right? Full play.
Yeah, a lot of the Bird Wizard decks had a couple One Rings like in the sideboard. Like it was.
Sure,
100%.
You might as well have it. Yeah.
What's really interesting about that whole thing is how they didn't ever take action against the One Ring in Modern, knowing how powerful it was. They knew it was powerful enough that they needed to rebalance it in Arena because they, for some reason, thought it was smart to put the Lord of the Rings set into Alchemy, which is like silly because all of those cards are very. And I don't even play Alchemy, but the games I did play, every time they played Lord of the Rings cards, we lost. Because
pretty much
different power level completely.
Don't worry, there's Prime now. We fixed it. There's
now
Prime
they just
now.
let you
it
play
all
your
balances out.
Things for free. Yeah. But like for real though, the One Ring is powerful, and it's interesting if you took a look at like their past ban announcements that they've made or reasoning for banning certain cards. I want you to pay attention to the ban announcement they made when they talked about Smuggler's Copter. Because when they banned Smuggler's Copter, the reason they banned it is because it was playable in any deck, and there were so many copies of these in tournament results that they said it led to less diversity of the format.
Like Bankbuster, the same thing. Yeah.
Similar deal, yep.
So if I'm taking a look at these cards and I'm looking at this card that says, we've got protection from everything for the turn, and it draws us a bunch of cards, and hey, I can play multiple copies and the legend rule doesn't actually matter. Legend rule in this case helps you,
totally.
Right?
Like Nadu.
It helps you. That card should have been gone a while ago. I think personally, being someone who hasn't played much Modern in paper, because I disliked showing up to my local Modern event and getting griefed all the time, it just led to unfun matches. Forget the One Ring, just grief was garbage.
Yeah.
You know,
I
think that the format needs an overhaul, and they need to make it fast because the Modern RCQ season is coming up. And I'm not just talking about like emergency banning Nadu. And it's interesting, and I mentioned this on the last podcast because I'm playing in the MTGO Creator Showdown next week, by the way. And the community chose to ban Nadu for the tournament because it's that egregious. It is not. It's not nice to watch, whether or not you're watching somebody stream with it or you're watching coverage. It was egregious to watch for the Pro Tour.
I mean, the mirrors are,
and obviously that means some other cards are going to be powerful, like the One Ring, like the Necrodominance deck, like the Energy deck, which is great. We have a new format, but like some cards just gotta go.
I mean, you're talking about an overhaul. They just overhauled the format. There are no grief is like, it still sees a little bit of play, but it's Legacy where grief is a huge problem now. Legacy players are just like, get this card out of the format. It's ridiculous. But you're right. Modern. I mean, I was talking about this with people again on the stream, and when right after the Pro Tour, and it was like, how do you fix this? And I don't think you can. I don't think there is an overhaul or renovation that you can make. The format's too big and it's too powerful. It's going to be nonstop bannings and adjustments. As soon as you ban the One Ring, then the next most powerful thing dominates the format. It's same when they banned Yorion, and before that it was whatever, and Uro, and they ban one thing and the next most powerful thing is just too good. It'll be the One Ring. The One Ring will eventually have to be banned. I think everybody knows that. Letting it go on is just painful for people trying to get into the format, right?
Yeah. I mean, will we think that it would be that bad of an idea for them to just do like a whole overhaul to the format in general? Like, I'm talking about take your ban list that you have now and just redo it all. Just unban
bring back
certain
Splinter
cards
Twin
that have been... I mean, I don't think...
It'll be bad. It wouldn't be good.
I'm very surprised that they didn't take the opportunity to unban that card in Modern.
Right?
And that's not because I was a Splinter Twin enjoyer. It's just simply because it's not that strong in comparison to some of the things that you can do.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
weird.
Well, it and Pod are both very powerful cards, but in a sea of other super powerful cards, like why not toss them in there? Let's see how that shakes things up. I think that.
Well,
I don't know,
Pod
I'm
is kind of
intrigued
bust.
by it.
Okay, so
Maybe
the problem.
Pod's still a bridge
Maybe
too far,
Court of
but
Calling should
regardless.
be banned. Yeah, like I feel like it's the
Ooh,
creature
that's-
tutors that are almost
yeah.
too good, because when the creatures are so individually powerful, like Nadu, look at the Nadu deck. One Thassa's Oracle, one, this one, like you're just having that toolbox
Imagine
is
getting
too
toured
good.
forward. By Thassa's
Why do you
Oracle in
think
multiple formats.
Storm?
It's crazy. Right?
Yeah, and Storm got crushed at the Pro Tour because of that. Because all the deck had to do was play one Dranith Manistrate, and now they have 5, and that's insane in game 1 against the Storm deck or whatever, right? Like these kind of cards.
Right.
So get rid of the cards that have the most powerful 4 words ever printed on a Magic card.
Yeah.
They always are the best cards. They're the cards that say, search your library for. Those words on a Magic card are the most powerful things you can see. They are the most broken cards. Get them out of there. It's like we were talking about that black cold snap, what is it called? Soul Spike. I mean, you know what you should do if you're a speculator and you're seriously worried about value and trying to hold on to cards that are going to go up in value? Go back through all of Magic's history and buy every copy of every card that says it can be cast for free or that says it searches up something. It doesn't matter what hoops you have to go through. Contagion or one of these old cards. Like, it doesn't matter. Buy all those up, because I think we've learned that free spells are so busted that even these free spells from way back in the day that the rate was so bad on are still free. So there is a deck that could come, if anything that costs 0, look at Mishra's Bauble, cards like that. That used to be a 5-cent card nobody cared about. Anything that costs 0 or is free to cast, or it doesn't matter what you have to do to make it happen. Look at Shuko, 0 to equip.
0.
Anytime you see a 0 or free to cast, pick it up. It doesn't matter how crappy it is, because you never know. I think one day it'll be, $20.
Right.
But it's kind of silly that that's the case, but that's kind of where Magic is now. But man, we covered the gamut. We talked about everything. I mean, there's so much going on. We could go on for another 2 hours probably, but
easily.
Maybe we should.
And so let's book another time so we can do this again
next
week and dive into those topics, as well as the dozens of new cards and new products that we hear about between now and then.
Right.
So yeah.
But one more thing before we go.
Ooh, yes.
We have to maintain tradition. It's a new tradition, but the question of the week. Now, I wasn't here last week, so I asked if I could do this one. This is a question I ask whenever I would go on a first date. Whenever I would say, what is your number 1 favorite, most nostalgic, favorite based on nostalgia Magic card? What is your number 1 homemade mom's apple pie, I don't know, whatever you eat, your feel good nostalgia. I don't know if for me, I started playing when I was a kid, so some people it's tied to their youth. I don't know. What is your number 1 card for nostalgia? Okay, Ham ran away. He's like, I can't answer this. He's broken down in tears.
It's not that. I literally I have a combo, and I literally have it framed.
One card.
Oh yes.
Okay,
you have a frame combo?
Card.
Okay, but it's one of those 2 cards, I assume.
But I have a soft spot for both of them. But the card that is easily my favorite card of all time is for nostalgic reasons. If you've watched any of my content, you have probably heard me talk about this, so I'll keep it relatively brief. It's Battle Screech.
Battle Screech? Oh, wow. Nice.
Battle Screech is fantastic. It's a sorcery for 2 white, and it puts 2 white birds into play, but you can flash it back by tapping 3 untapped white creatures you control, and it spots you too. And so the idea is if you have one other white creature lying around, you can then tap all of them and you get 2 more. So, you're kind of doing the Convoke thing before the Convoke thing was a thing. I have a soft spot for it. And one of my early days, in some of my early jank brews, I had an Azorius Birds deck. They was using like Soul Catcher's Area and some of those old school feather counter things. It was a lot of fun.
Nice.
But I used it alongside Quiet Speculation. But Battle Screech is easily my favorite, but Quiet Speculation was great because it allows you to search your library, the most powerful words, and find 3 cards with flashback, put them into your graveyard. And so I would put 3 copies of Battle Screech into my yard, and I'd have a couple of other birds lying around, cast 1 copy of Battle Screech, and before you know it, there's a huge cloud of birds on the field. And so next turn, like, I'm on tapping with these. Let's see what happens. It was,
nice.
It was
Can I see the frame?
And
show me. Oh wow!
So my camera's inverted. So let me.
That's great.
Yes.
Oh no, we could see it. We could see it the correct way.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, but so Quiet Speculation, Battle Screech.
Battle Screech is
it's one of my first one of the first times where I remember looking through my collection and seeing like, wait a minute, this interaction is awesome. Let's go. And and that was like all the janky brews started from that moment. So I just Nice. So Battle Screech is it has got to be my answer with a shout out to Quiet Speculation. Yeah.
All right, Carlo, hit us. You got? Big nostalgia feels. Okay. What is it? Number 1.
So I started playing Magic in 8th edition. And my first standard format I ever played was the Junior Super Series tournament series that they used to have. You had to be 16 or under to play, and you were allowed to play for college scholarship money.
That's insane. That's
awesome. I won my first Junior Super Series tournament qualifier to make it to the big one, which was held along the same time as U.S. Nationals at the time. And it was actually the day before, so if you scrubbed out, you could go play in the Nationals, like LCQs and stuff to get into Nationals. Nice. I won with Tooth and Nail and Twine. So my favorite card is Tooth and Nail. And at the time, we used to cheat into play. You could do Platinum Angel and Darksteel Colossus. Or if it was when Kamigawa came out, we were able to do Kiki-Jiki and Darksteel Colossus to make a hasty attacking Darksteel. We could also Mephidros Vampire and Triskelion combo you with Tooth and Nail and Twine. That would deal infinite damage. Awesome. And so this is why I guess I have sort of the warm fuzzy spots for Smuggler's Surprise, because it reminds me of being able to Tooth and Nail. It's essentially the same thing with Calamity plus non-legendary big creature.
It's so funny. If I didn't know you at all and you told me your Magic card, the most nostalgic was Tooth and Nail, I would immediately probably be able to guess the decks that you play in Standard and Pioneer. Like the ramp has never left you. It's been there the whole time. Ever since that first tournament, you're just like, I won that tournament. That's etched into my brain. I'm never playing other archetype. That's great.
I love it.
Mine's a little bit older. My very first Synergy deck was I've started playing Magic the year it came out, toward the end of the first year. It was very hard to get cards, but there was a group of people who would get together at the university every couple months, and at the Centennial Library downtown, they had this big kind of open area with tables and chairs, and Magic players took this over. This is way before the internet and everything else, and I remember seeing somebody use this card to very good effect, so I immediately started trading everything I had to try and get a playset of Cabal Ghoul. The very first card I remember seeing and going, oh, that looks so awesome. It looks evil and badass, and it's Arabian Nights card. It's essentially a gray ogre. It's, I think, a 1 black 2 colorless creature. But it says, at the end of the turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it for every creature that died. So back in those days, we played a lot of multiplayer Magic with friends and stuff, and one of the guys at the library wrecked the table with Wrath of God into Cabal Ghoul. And then Cabal Ghoul on end step became like a 20/20, and I was just, my 12-year-old brain exploded, and I was like, oh my god. And I just love this card. I remember trading. It was hard to find, and you had Diamond Valleys in the deck as well to sack your huge ghoul to gain a bunch of life and all this. It was just a bunch of old Arabian Nights cards. But Cabal Ghoul, for some reason, I love it, and I think a big part of it is it's never been reprinted. It's never been, I don't know, it's not even that good of a card. It's not like it's on the reserve list or anything, I'm pretty sure, but I think Diamond Valley and some of those other cards are, but Cabal Ghoul. I just love the art. I loved everything about the card, and to this day, I know a lot of people back then loved Juzam Jin, and that's another big iconic card, but I almost liked Ghoul more because it wasn't the big, everybody knows the Jin's so good, and it's like this underrated, weird little card. I don't know. I love the art. I loved everything about it. That's my jam.
I had never heard of it, and it took me a second to actually pull it up for the video feed, because how would you spell that? What's going? Yeah.
I should have said.
Never, no, you're fine. I had never seen this one before. Yeah.
Weird card.
Really solid. Yeah.
I liked it, and with Wrath of God, the goal was to little kid decks. If I could go back and look at my deck from back then, I would probably just throw the whole thing out. I remember playing all the colors, whenever I'd trade for new cards I thought were cool, they just went right in the deck. Had to I'll put in a couple planes or whatever, sure.
And for all of our Zoomers listening, essentially this combo would be the same in current standard if you were to depopulate and then flash in your Kutzel's Flanker or something
on
to
end
counters on end step.
Yeah, exactly. Now the 3-drop has flash and a bunch of other modes, and but back in those days it didn't. Anyway, good times. We'll
Love
come
it.
up with a new one for next week. And
Fantastic.
Oh, anybody out there who's listening, by the way, please let us know if you have a good question that's not what's the best deck in standard after rotation, but something like this, something a little bit, something that lines up with personality or personal tastes. There is no right or wrong answer here. Let us know in the comments or send us a message on Discord.
The question too, yeah.
Or that too. Love to hear it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we do have a podcast questions channel on our Discord server. That's definitely the best way to go. But you can also tweet at us at MagicJank, or reach out in the comments. We definitely do check those out. So yeah, we appreciate it. Oh my goodness, yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, this was a hefty one. We covered a lot of bases, and there's still more. There's still more to discuss. But we're gonna wait till next time for that. So yes, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. Before we go, do you want to let people know where they can find you out on the internet and what's coming up? Let's see, Carlo, let's start with you. What you got going on?
Yeah, so you can find me on the internet anywhere at @CFevretto_Jr. Mostly stream on Twitch, doing a lot of standard content based on viewer deck submissions and stuff like this. Occasionally, I get to play my own brews and doppelgang whenever I want. That's also great. But it's the same handle on all the socials: Instagram, TikTok, Threads, because that still exists, Twitter. I have, depending upon when you listen to this, there is a giveaway happening on my Twitter right now for Magic the Gathering online play points. So if you want to get on that, go ahead and head over there. And find me anywhere you like.
Nice.
Sweet. Damien, how about you, man?
I'm on those social media sites, but I don't post often. Most of my content is all on Twitch, DamienF16, on YouTube, DamienF16_Magic. I also have another YouTube channel that I play non-Magic games, just DamienF16 on YouTube. So a couple different places. Also writing articles for mtgcircle.com. You can find articles every 4 or 5 days there from me. The last one was about the topic we covered today, I mentioned earlier. But a bunch of great writers. I know Ham writes there, Numbskull, and a few other people. So, that's where I'm at. And yourself, Ham?
Heck yeah. So, yeah, I'm streaming on Twitch, twitch.tv/HamHacks42. I'm also on all the various socials, posting silly video sketches that, have varying degrees of joke density and humor. But at the end of the day, I try to make them at least entertaining and interesting so that you leave with something to think about. And you get to hear me doing a really crappy Boston accent, which I think is fun. And so I'm also, writing over at MTG Circle as well. And it's funny, talking about kind of how difficult it is to keep up with things and trying to make sure that what we're talking about continues to be relevant. A lot of the time, I actually end up doing deck techs about just, fun arena decks that I'm playing in various formats. That ends up being the case because that's always, those are always fine, and even if I'm not claiming it's top tier meta, but it's a fun set of interactions. So hopefully you can learn some things. Maybe you want to play it as it is. Maybe you want to take some ideas and run with it. It's a lot of fun. So yeah.
You know what? We didn't talk about decks. We got to do that next episode. We should talk about a bunch of the non-metagame decks that we're playing. I was mentioning Niv to Light or Niv to Life, I'm calling it. But you're also playing some weird decks and stuff.
We should do that. Stuff. I did went through a Crashing Footfalls phase in Timeless and Historic recently, which was a ton of fun. And I think Zoyoa's Justice is one of the most underrated cards out there right now. It is wildly inconsistent. But I really enjoy it.
Give us
and
deal.
And I'm going to be writing when we're done here. I'm actually going to write an article about a timeless deck featuring Guard of the Reliquary that I've been really digging.
Ooh.
So,
hell yeah.
But yes, so more to come on that in the future. So yes, next week we'll definitely dig into some of those off meta decks. And again, getting ready for a rotation. What do we think might actually step up and go from like weird unplayable jank to maybe tier 2 viable? Maybe there are some of those, or tier 2 decks that maybe will step up and be contenders. I don't know. A lot of speculation, a lot of fun times to be had. So yeah, gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you, dear listener, for tuning in. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
All right, we'll catch you next time. Later. Everybody.
See ya.